9-year history. I applaud your efforts, and I call upon all the primary dealers to work harder this year to fulfill their primary dealership obligations. I now invite the Managing Director, Stanbic Bank Uganda Limited, to receive the award. Our congratulations, sir. So, a beautiful award. This is presented by Bank of Uganda to Stanbic Bank Uganda Limited in recognition of their outstanding performance as best primary dealer in Uganda government securities for the year 2013.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You want to say what?
Thank you, Governor, for that wonderful recognition. And we certainly don't take it for granted as Stanbic Bank. I did come this morning with our head of global markets, basically the lady who makes it happen. Mine was to actually receive the award. So she actually does the work on that. But I think I would just like to add that clearly as Stanbic Bank, one of the things that we pride ourselves in doing, and one of the things that we are committed to do, is to see how we can help deepen the financial markets in Uganda. We would certainly like to see and welcome the opportunity for more people more investors to get involved in the market, to be able to trade some of these instruments. They are not limited to commercial banks. And certainly if I have a plea to the media, it would be to help us popularize and to ensure that we give the right kind of coverage to the opportunities that are available to investors. We see far too many investors today who have money which they have invested in areas where they are at risk. These are instruments which are not carrying risk, yet have got very attractive returns. So to the extent that we can certainly see more people, that we would be very, very encouraged, and we would feel as Stanbic Bank that we have played our part in help deepening this financial market. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine, how many minutes do you give them? And
I want to give an opportunity to talk very rapidly, because I know that you're going to be following the bank probably to the rest of today and tomorrow, but an opportunity to two people who want to ask him some quick questions here, and then we can proceed with the
During the welfare ceremony, there was an announcement that create an electronic system which in essence would help get into banking sector. It's 2 years now, 2014, that system has been prototyped.
I think I'll ask EDO to make a clarification. I think the system was for for member banks. That's the Reuters system, and
we actually during the time since 2002 up to date, we've had two systems. The first one is a Reuters trade reporting, which now is meant for commercial banks, and then we have another system called CSD system, which is meant for the primary dealer banks to send in their bids to the Bank of Uganda electronically. I'm happy to say these systems are both up and running. The Reuters trade reporting was rolled out last year, and the CDS was rolled out all banks and government related to the system.
But I think, Samuel, I just want to reiterate the issue that was just presented by the MD, that the media will play a bigger role in getting information to the wider public. The electronic systems, yes, will help member banks. The posting of information on the website will also help those who can access internet. But in terms of reaching out to the wider public, the media has a greater role. And I think that call by the MD is something that should be taken up by you in terms of strengthening your financial reporting on treasury bills, the opportunity provided by investment in treasury bills, and maybe to re-echo one issue that he said, that in terms of investment choices, there are people who direct their resources in choices that carry risk, whereas treasury bills are riskless. That is one. But there are also those who place their money on demand deposits and even savings deposits, where the return is between 0 and about 4%, whereas the return on a treasury bill is anything between 9 and 14%, depending on the maturity. So there are these issues that have to be picked up by the media. They will also be picked up by our own communications department as part of the financial literacy. Okay. As someone using Stanbic Bank.
Why should you bother? Sorry, I didn't quite get the. Why should you bother doing what?
Whether they are worried about it.
What does this mean to a
Aha, thank you. And this perhaps goes back to what I was saying a little earlier. And I'm actually now talking to you as the media. We actually stand little chance of growing this market the way we should if we don't have your participation. So what does it mean to you as the layman, as a person on the street? You actually need to be able to understand that there are opportunities for you which are actually safe. Let me put that as an example. Somebody has an opportunity, they have maybe 200, 300 million shillings, and they decide they are going to invest in property. Property in itself is not necessarily a bad investment, but it carries risk. The return on that property may be anywhere between whatever it is, 10 to 12% with risk. The same individual or somebody else can take the same 200, 300 million shillings and buy government paper and get attractive returns without the risk associated. This is how now we can translate that into what the man on the street can do. Now, in the event that you think 200 and 300 million shillings is a large amount, which it is, you can actually invest as little as 100,000 shillings. So it is scalable. This is all scalable. This is not some rich man's or rich investor's opportunity. This is scalable. This is what the average person can be able to participate in. But we need your participation in ensuring that as many people as possible begin to understand these opportunities. Good question. The government paper, the treasury bills and treasury bonds, for example, are actually one of a series of different opportunities. So it's not as if everybody will go into one. Just the same way as I gave the example of property. Not everybody goes into property. It's just one of many opportunities that are available. Now, from a performance point of view, obviously, they perform well. They actually perform well. So if somebody is looking at a basket of opportunities, certainly we would be encouraging people to say, look at some of these as opportunities for you to be able to invest in, as part of your investment basket that you would like to look at.
I think let me just add one other issue, and I think at a later stage, maybe not necessarily today, Adam was someone I think who could even pick up this one. There is still a room for us as Uganda to increase savings. Our savings, private savings, are still very low, even compared to countries at the same level of development. I think we are still at about 12%. So there is still room of shifting money from private consumption to private savings. So in addition to the point, which is the choice from the basket of opportunities, there is also the other, which is shifting some money from consumption into savings. So you need to at least flag those two issues. About that is one of choices between a basket of opportunities, but the other is one of shifting some of the money from consumption to savings. So I thank you, MD. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry for us to ask you to leave as we move on to the next agenda item.
We are happy to move on.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, and congratulations to the person in the kitchen. Okay, thank you. This is the monetary policy statement for February 2014. Annual core inflation, this is the measure of inflation that excludes prices of food crops, energy, and utilities, was slightly lower than projected in January 2014, declining to 4.6% from 5.7% in December 2013. Core prices have virtually remained flat in the 3 months to January 2014 as a result of exchange rate appreciation of about 6.8% over the last 1 year. The annual overall inflation, the headline inflation, however, rose to 6.9% from 6.7% in December 2013, largely on account of annual food crops inflation, which rose to 21.4% from 12.7% in December 2013. The increase in annual food crops inflation was largely due to the relatively low price levels of food crops in January 2013. Both monthly headline and core inflation declined by 0.1%. Both of them declined by 0.1%, from 0.1% and 0.2% respectively in December 2013. The Bank of Uganda forecasts indicate that average annual headline and core inflation are likely to remain in the range of 5 to 6% in the first half of 2014, increasing only gradually above the target over a 12-month horizon as excess capacity is absorbed. The outlook for inflation is subject to several risks emanating from both the external environment and the domestic economy. The dry spell experienced in parts of the East African region might impact domestic food prices in the coming months. In addition, a reversal of the current exchange rate appreciation could also serve to strengthen inflationary pressures going forward. Real GDP growth for 2013-14 is projected at between 6 to 6.5%. Domestic household demand is slowly gaining traction and is expected to continue to rise. Although growth in a credit extension to the private sector by the banking system has continued to be subdued, as reflected by its 12-month growth of 6.3% in December 2013, credit extension to households continued to rise at a fast pace, growing by 38%, in contrast to a decline of 13% at the corresponding time in 2012. The buoyant credit to households is expected to support economic growth going forward. In addition, the improving global economic environment and the increased fiscal stimuli, including public investment on infrastructure, will be growth supporting. Yes. Credit to private sector? Are you saying that we are above the targets for the peer? Yeah, no, we are still, we are still below. Let me start with your first issue of whether there is a divergence between what the reality on the ground and the numbers as reflected in the tables. The tables are actually picking the reality on the ground. That's what we are summarizing for you and sharing with you. Domestic household demand, I think this must be, if you look at the past almost 2 years, this is one of these first periods when we see lending for households picking up and the rate at which it has picked up is 38%. This is reality, 38%. And in fact, if you compare this to a similar period last year, you had a decline which was 13%. Now you have a recovery in lending to households of 38%. So definitely this will add to household demand. The other issue you always have to look at is the economic activities and the actors in these economic activities. As government spends, as people export, all this means that someone somewhere, an actor, especially within the household sector, is getting income, and that is also adding to aggregate demand. Okay, so these numbers reflect reality on the ground. Now, your point, and it is a point that always comes up, that is this felt by each and everybody? The answer is no. Not each and everybody feels it, but at the aggregate, the households have had a big increase in credit of 38%. We have had a big increase in demand that is getting stronger on the basis of these numbers, and even on the basis of our projections that will get even stronger. Okay. There are 3 hands that side. There was the issue. Sorry. Before you come in, there is the issue of private sector credit. I think this is a point that has come up in several of our monthly monetary policy statements, where we were very much concerned by the levels of growth in private sector credit. Finally, we can see some light at the end of the tunnel, but we are not yet at the levels of the PSI target. Okay? Yes? The last figures? I think for South Sudan, it will be too speculative on my part to start sharing with you numbers. I think it is too early for us to get concrete numbers. Maybe by the time we get to the March or April statement, or even maybe June, we will have more concrete numbers. You have to do surveys for you to get a proper picture. What we have now is that we know if this is sustained, it will have an impact on exports, it will have an impact on remittances, it will have an impact on growth. Okay? Our prayer is that it is not sustained, so that whatever impact on both exports, remittances, both exports and remittances is small and a short-lived one. That's all I can share at the moment, but not concrete numbers. On your second one, yes, if you look at especially the 2012-2013, we had increases in foreign currency lending, and domestic lending was almost flat. What we are seeing now is we have now started seeing some pickup in lending in local currency, which is the shillings, as I have just pointed out in answering the previous statement. And I don't think we are now worried about the foreign currency lending. No. Okay. Up. Which charges? Can you be clearer?
Interest on loans for agriculture and agricultural sector increased. Interest on loans for land purchases increased, mortgages, and a couple of other sectors. And right now we're maintaining the key rate at 11.4%, which means you expect the banks not to react to it in that regard to the market. So how does Uganda look at these
Okay. I think this is a point that over the whole last 1 year we've discussed with the media, and one is the CBR is a guide to interest rates, okay? And two is that the interest rate charged by a bank to a borrower will depend on the assessment of risk of that particular borrower and the assessment of risk of the project. Okay? And so it will depend on the individual, the promoters, and on the project. And there will be divergences as you move between sectors and as you move between different borrowers. The interest rates by banks are not controlled. So each bank will make an assessment on the basis of the sector, on the basis of the borrower, will make an assessment of the overall risk, on the overall cost of funds to come up with that number. But we'll also take into consideration the CBR, which is just the guide. So by maintaining, we have maintained this rate at 11.5. But a bank, based on how the other things have changed in terms of the cost of funds, in terms of the risk, might actually go for a lower rate in terms of lending to a certain sector. It is not something that I think I can come up with that because we have retained it at 11.5, banks will also retain their lending rates at 11.5. Some may actually go up. Some of them may, if their assessment of risk is higher. No, we haven't come to that. You asked me about interest rates, the determination of interest rates by individual banks. If you want me to give you an assessment of, in terms of the outlook, we think that it is brighter. The external environment has definitely changed in a positive way. The advanced economies are finally getting out. Some of these advanced economies are finally getting out of their economic problems. So the external environment will be growth supporting. I've also said that the fiscal expenditures by government, especially not really, including the expenditures by government on infrastructure, are also growth supporting. Three is that when you look at the past almost 5-6 months, we've gone through a period of stability. The exchange rate has been, well, it has strengthened, but it has been very stable compared to 11-12. Okay? You look at inflation, we are now dealing with numbers, core inflation of about 4.6. We are saying that it might increase as we move on to the second half of this year, but we are not looking at numbers that we were looking at in 11-12. So I can't say that the central bank has given a very pessimistic picture. Okay. Same rates of, just a clarification, rates of what? Okay, let me, if you look at the East African region relative to 11-12, we have performed better than 11-12. If you look at the currencies, you look at Kenya, you look at Tanzania, Uganda, if you look at the exchange rates, they have been more stable in the recent period than what we saw in 11-12. Interest rates, especially the equivalent of a central bank rate. Actually, Kenya has come down to almost 8.5. Okay, Tanzania doesn't announce a rate, but if you look at their rates, they have also been very stable. Rwanda was not as affected as Kenya and Uganda. The inflation in Rwanda has been relatively stable over the past 3 years. So the economies are much stronger than they were in 11-12. Your second point is that when shall we get to having a single rate? Okay, you can only have a single rate when you have moved on to the final stage, which is the monetary union, where you have a single authority announcing a rate. But what you might get before we get there is having this rate within a similar range, okay, where the divergence is not big. We shall have to use this period to harmonize many other things, and the chances are that the rates will be within a similar range, not a single rate. Okay. Just like you, I would want that specific assessment. It is too early. It is too early. When I think some of you in the media have said that some people have even started returning. So it makes it even very difficult for us to say this is the impact that people have all left Juba. No, I mean, you are telling me now that some people have returned. Do you know how many people have returned? No, so it is very early for us to make an assessment. I mean, it would be too speculative for me to go into numbers. Okay? Okay, I can start with the last one. For those who export to Southern Sudan, or those who are engaged in activities of providing services in Southern Sudan, there is a return, there is a payment. If I'm a teacher in Southern Sudan, okay, I'll get a wage. Or if I'm someone employed as a mechanic in Southern Sudan, I get some payment or profit or something. Now, that adds to aggregate demand, okay? Especially if I can transfer that money back home to my relatives in Uganda. Now, you compare it to a situation where someone doesn't have that income. If you don't have that income, that is an adverse shock. You see that impact on demand? So now look at different agents who are into export. You look at someone who is driving a truck from Kampala to Juba. You look at someone who is employed in Juba. Once there is conflict, all those people, I think the best word to use is unemployment of the resources. I think that's the word to use, that the resources will not be employed and there is no payment to those resources. And since there is no payment to those resources, aggregate demand, even at a household level, goes down. Okay? So that's what we mean by an adverse demand shock. Let me move on to the exchange rate. Exchange rate has got two components that will determine a movement. One is where you receive news. Okay, something comes and hits the market that this is likely to happen, and the exchange rate moves. The central bank, in those circumstances, can take actions to correct that by providing information to people like you in the media. We could intervene to stabilize movements in the exchange rate. But we are always very careful, very, very careful, when the source of change is something fundamental. Now, if you look at the numbers over the past 5-6 months, and I think Adam will be going through these numbers, one of the reasons why the exchange rate has strengthened is because of higher portfolio inflows. There have been some inflows, especially by people outside Uganda who want to participate in our treasury bills. Central banks have to be very careful trying to buy dollars to stem that appreciation. Now, I know you are looking for a level, an appropriate level. No central bank will give you that level, because as you live here, everybody will be speculating that the central bank has moved away from its desired level. We would never share a number. We don't have a number to share with the wider public. But what we do is to make regular assessments. And if one of the reports talked about an overvaluation, that overvaluation comes from that assessment. But it does not mean that the central bank is going to take actions to correct for that overvaluation over the next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get it back to a desired level. Lastly, is because that is a statement which is also contained in the monetary policy statement, is that it might actually correct going forward. And we have put it in the risks we face, that if it corrects going forward, okay, that will mean there's a depreciation or a weakening of the currency, and that will be inflation enhancing, okay? Because it is, once there's a depreciation, you find that it works its way through prices very quickly. Those are the three issues. I think I've answered your question. GDP, I will refer to Adam on whether we have changed our mind on the outlook from 6 to 7% to 6 to 6.5%. Okay. Let me take up both issues. There is a responsibility for the central bank in both. there are reasons for attracting commercial banks. They do not all offer the same products. There are banks that are focused on small savers, mainly those who are like microfinance type savers. There are banks that are focused on the rural areas. There are banks that are focused at the high end, offering products for corporates. So there is a wide range, and to the extent that a bank is entering the market with new products, we welcome it. In fact, we will be looking and encouraging maybe the existing or even new ones to move into the area of Islamic banking. Now, before we license the bank, there must be a due diligence made on the institution. There must be an assessment of the business and the viability of that particular institution going forward. That is our responsibility, and there is need to license new institutions that are coming in with new products that are reaching out to different segments of the economy. The responsibility on financial literacy, that is also ours. I think we have our Director Communications who is taking a lead on financial literacy. At a later stage, she can even share some of this information. And it is a message to different segments of the economy, but also getting to those who are hard to reach, people who are in the rural areas, and sharing with them information and the benefits of associating and using and exploiting